Imagine standing at the edge of disaster. A game you love, hyped, anticipated, dreamt about, slips closer and closer to failure. Not because it lacked ambition, but because somewhere along the way, something went wrong. Bad design choices. Broken mechanics. A loss of the very soul that made it special. It's a moment every gamer fears, watching potential turn into disappointment. But what if, against all odds, someone spoke up? What if players, testers, or even a lone voice inside the studio shouted into the chaos, and someone actually listened? Sometimes, feedback isn't just useful. It's the difference between a forgotten failure and a legendary comeback. Today, we dive into 10 games that stood on the brink and were pulled back by the power of feedback. Brace yourself. Some of these stories will make you wonder, how close did we come to losing them forever? Imagine standing at the edge of disaster. A game you love, hyped, anticipated, dreamt about, slips closer and closer to failure. Not because it lacked ambition, but because somewhere along the way, something went wrong. Bad design choices. Broken mechanics. A loss of the very soul that made it special. It's a moment every gamer fears, watching potential turn into disappointment. But what if, against all odds, someone spoke up? What if players, testers, or even a lone voice inside the studio shouted into the chaos, and someone actually listened? Sometimes feedback isn't just useful. It's the difference between a forgotten failure and a legendary comeback. Today, we dive into 10 games that stood on the brink and were pulled back by the power of feedback. Brace yourself. Some of these stories will make you wonder, how close did we come to losing them forever? What happens when your biggest, most expensive game crashes and burns on arrival? Total War, Rome 2 wasn't just a misstep, it was a full-blown catastrophe. Glitchy AI, broken battles, endless technical issues. Players who once dreamed of commanding. Mighty legions instead found themselves commanding frustration, and for Creative Assembly, the studio behind it, everything was on the line. The backlash was swift and merciless. Fans, critics, and loyalists alike flooded forums and reviews with anger and disappointment. Rome 2 wasn't just a broken game, it was a broken promise. At that moment, the studio faced a brutal choice. Fix it, or watch everything they'd built fall apart. And against all odds, they chose to fight. Over years, patch after patch, they didn't just fix bugs, they rebuilt the game's very soul. The Empire Edition wasn't just an update, it was a full redemption. Arc released free to all original players, it repaired reputations and reignited passion for the franchise. Today, Rome 2 stands as a reminder, in gaming and in life. Sometimes, greatness isn't about never falling. It's about getting back, up stronger than ever. Rome 2's rebirth is a lesson in second chances. Would you accept Max Payne without his iconic voice? For fans, the answer was a resounding no. When Rockstar Games announced Max Payne 3, excitement surged until the bombshell dropped. They were replacing James McCaffrey, the gritty, gravel-voiced soul of Max, with someone new. The backlash was immediate and ferocious. Max without McCaffrey wasn't just a small change, it was erasing the very heart of the character. The voice that had whispered pain, loss, and broken justice into our ears for years was suddenly gone, and fans weren't having it. Rockstar heard the outrage, and to their credit, they listened. Not only did they bring James McCaffrey back, but they reworked Max's entire character, modeled to resemble him more closely. It wasn't about graphics, it was about preserving an identity. The battered detective, the haunted soul. We needed to feel that voice again, deep in our bones. Without McCaffrey, Max would have been just another face in the crowd. But with him, he remained unforgettable. One voice, one character. Sometimes, that's all it takes to keep a soul intact. What if the ocean survival you dreamed of was almost unplayable? That's the reality Subnautica narrowly escaped. In the beginning, this ambitious underwater adventure was drowning in frustration. An unforgiving survival system, brutal mechanics, and punishing difficulty made what should have been a dream voyage into the deep. feel like an endless struggle for air. Early access was their lifeline, but only if they used it right. Instead of ignoring the early cries for help, the developers dove headfirst into player feedback. They listened, they watched, and they adapted. Subnautica evolved. The relentless hunger and thirst meters were softened, giving players the freedom to explore the alien beauty of the oceans without constant dread. Base building became richer, more creative. Discovery and wonder took center stage, and survival, while still thrilling, was no longer an exhausting grind. The ocean became a vast, inviting mystery once more, and when the final version surfaced, it wasn't just another survival game. It was a masterpiece of exploration and awe. Because they listened, Subnautica didn't just float, it soared. Could a clunky fan project become one of the best FPS experiences? At launch, Metro 2033 was bursting with atmosphere, but nearly crippled by its own ambition. The controls were stiff, the stealth system was wildly inconsistent, and the level design often felt like a confusing maze. It was a haunting world, but surviving it was sometimes harder because of the game itself, not the dangers within it. Yet players saw something in Metro, a raw beauty worth fighting for. And thankfully, so did the developers. They listened to the waves of feedback pouring in. They acknowledged the rough edges, the frustrations, and the places where their vision hadn't quite connected. Enter Metro 2033 Redux. This wasn't just a patch, it was a rebirth. The controls were tightened. The stealth finally made sense. The broken immersion was reforged into a seamless, terrifying journey through the ruins of Moscow's underground. Metro didn't lose its soul. It found its true form. They didn't have to fix it. But because they did, they made Metro a legend. What if an entire desert adventure needed a second wind to survive? When Atlas Fallen launched, hopes were high, but reality hit hard. Despite its promising world and dazzling sand-surfing mechanics, the game stumbled across the dunes. The opening dragged painfully. Enemies blurred together in repetition. Customization felt barren in a genre built on freedom and choice. It could have been another forgotten mid-tier RPG, lost beneath the sands of missed potential. But the developers didn't give up. They listened, they regrouped, and they fought to breathe new life into their creation. The Rain of Sand update wasn't a simple patch. It was a full-scale resurrection. New areas to explore, new enemies to challenge, a reworked opening that moved with urgency and purpose, and a fresh voice, Ben Starr, lending spirit and weight to the game's guiding presence. Atlas Fallen didn't become perfect, but it became alive, dynamic, worthy. It's not about being flawless, it's about fighting to be better. What if your game's true form only arrived years later? When Death's Gambit first launched, it was full of heart, but rough around the edges. The world was intriguing, the ideas creative, but bugs, clunky systems, and frustrating difficulty, spikes held it back from greatness. It felt more like a promising draft than a finished journey, but the team behind it didn't abandon their fallen creation. They listened to every critique, every plea, every honest piece of feedback, and then they did something rare. They rebuilt it, not a patch, not a quick fix, a complete reimagining. Death's Gambit. Afterlife wasn't just a version 2.0, it was a rebirth, a revamped world map, 8 new areas, in 20 new weapons, expanded endings, rebalanced bosses, redesigned talents. A true second chance crafted with love and fierce determination. The game didn't just heal its wounds, it rose higher, stronger, grander. They didn't just patch the cracks. They built a new monument from the ruins. What happens when your dream RPG nearly crushes you under its weight? Pathfinder Kingmaker promised a grand adventure, building kingdoms, forging alliances, conquering wild frontiers. But at launch, it felt more like a siege, a brutal combination of relentless bugs, punishing difficulty, and missing guidance left players stranded in frustration. The dream had become a heavy crown too burdensome to wear. Yet within the wreckage, something stubborn refused to die. The developers listened, they heard the cries for help echoing across forums and reviews, and they fought back, one patch at a time. Turn-based combat was added, giving players the time and control the chaos had stripped away. New tutorials eased the overwhelming systems. The once crushing difficulty was tempered with care, turning impossible dungeons into rewarding challenges. It didn't fix everything. Some scars remained, but what rose from those broken beginnings was a game that finally honored its original dream. Even amid chaos, dedication can carve out redemption. How bad must a translation be for everyone to notice? Is 8. Lacrimosa of Dana arrived with a story meant to sweep players into a grand, emotional journey across a mysterious island. Instead, what greeted them was confusion, awkward phrasing, and a script so mangled that even those unfamiliar with Japanese could sense something was terribly wrong. Fans didn't just grumble, they rallied. They voiced their disappointment loud and clear, not with anger alone, but with passion for what the game could have been. The developers heard them. And in a rare act of humility and dedication, they didn't just tweak a few lines, they overhauled the entire translation. Dialogue was re-recorded, scripts were rewritten. The soul of YS8 was carefully unearthed from beneath the rubble of bad localization. When players returned, the difference was like night and day. The heart of the story finally shone through, vivid, powerful, unforgettable. Words matter, and when they get fixed, stories come alive. What if an obscure Polish RPG took the world by storm by listening? When The Witcher first launched in 2007, it wasn't the polished, celebrated masterpiece we remember today. Its English localization was clumsy, the voice acting stiff, and technical hiccups lurked around every corner. Outside of Poland, it was seen as an odd, rough gem, interesting but frustrating. And then, something unexpected happened. Despite the flaws, international players fell in love with the world of Geralt. Sales soared, reviews poured in, and CD Projekt Red faced a choice: take the money and move on, or honor the unexpected trust the world had placed in them. They chose to listen, and they chose to rebuild. The Enhanced Edition wasn't just a patch, it was a near-complete overhaul. New scripts, new animations, redesigned characters, it transformed The Witcher from a cult curiosity into a true icon of the RPG world. Today we look back and know it's proof that second chances, when seized, can change gaming history forever. Sometimes, listening is the real superpower in gaming. It's not flashy, it's not loud, but it's what turns a broken dream into a living legend. Today, we've seen how some of the most unforgettable games almost slipped through our fingers. Saved, only because someone, somewhere, chose to listen and act. Maybe it was a passionate fan, maybe a brave tester, maybe even a stubborn developer who refused to give up. Whatever the case, these comeback stories remind us, greatness isn't always born perfect. Sometimes it's forged through failure, reflection, and second chances. Which story surprised you the most? Was it Resident Evil's near disaster, Rome's redemption, or the hidden masterpiece behind The Witcher's rough beginnings? Tell us your thoughts in the comments, and if you love epic gaming comebacks like these, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and join our journey through gaming's most unbelievable transformations. Who knows which game will be saved next? Maybe even one you're playing right now.